It's extreme.
Metallica's all about the live performance.
It's harsh.
They are absolute musical gods.
Abrasive.
Well, just because they got their hair cut short doesn't mean a thing.
There's nothing pretty about it.
Kids today, what are you going to do?
It's not whining at all.
Metallica is what rock is in the year 2000.
Metallica! Shit, you know these guys. Unless you've been living in a subway for the last 15 years, you've turned your TV on and seen them. You bought yourself a CD, a tape, some vinyl, or heaven forbid, you downloaded an MP3. They are truly rock's warriors. They came into the early 1980s with basically no radio play at all. How did they do it, you ask? Touring, touring, and more touring. They wrote the book on taking the stage and stealing it. The band has overcome many an obstacle, including a pyrotechnic explosion, many a skateboarding accident, a legend's death, and now a well-publicized fight with Napster. And they're still on top of their game. Mark Athatakis was just a schoolboy when Metallica first took San Francisco by storm in 1983, but he's followed their career ever since.
Well, Metallica is an interesting case, I mean, especially with San Francisco, because most bands moved to Los Angeles if you wanted to get your record career going. But what happened with the case of Metallica is I think that, they felt that, you had to be, that the Los Angeles record industry was about being preened and about, being dressed up, and Metallica was never very much about that. So, it seemed like, for Metallica, and maybe even a lot of celebrities, that San Francisco is a place where you can come to and you can be very straightforward and honest and do what you really want to do with music. So, it was, from what I can gather, it was a great place for them to start because you have people who really are tapped into that sort of thing. People don't like anything that smacks of image or glamour or anything like that. People want honesty, and I think early on that's a bit of what Metallica reflected. And I think it's sort of interesting that Metallica would come out of San Francisco because it's never been a huge metal background, never been a huge metal town. And I think, I would joke somewhat that it might be the weather. There's not, heavy metal bands tend to come out of places that are cold, Cleveland or Chicago or Norway or something like that. And, there's very much a sort of laid-back, kick-back culture here. And I think, a band like Metallica, which is being very straightforward, very aggressive, very angry, was going to stick out in that sort of culture at the time. I think, just Metallica was extremely unique for a San Francisco band. That's not to say that there wasn't a metal scene. I mean, Death Angel would come out a couple of years later, and metal bands have always been here. It seems that, there wasn't quite a band that, was such a fan of, your Rushes or, any of your, or even Zeppelin. Frankly, I mean, a lot of people thought that, that was sort of, retro and passé, but, Metallica didn't.
It's another exciting night up ahead. We got Ozzy Osbourne, Metallica, Creed, Led Zeppelin, and a lot of your requests as well. Remember,
the time that I really noticed that things were going to change was probably 1991, sitting, doing my radio shift, and by golly, I'm supposed to play Metallica, Enter Sandman. Queued that puppy up and played it, and just within the first, 5 seconds, I just said, oh, okay, this is going to go someplace. And I was right. That and like 4 other tunes from that Metallica Black album did extremely well. But it was obvious that they had turned a corner and that they were going to go from a speed metal band, which is kind of what they were for about 10 years. And, they got a record deal pretty early on, and that's pretty cool. And they put out some good, solid efforts, but it wasn't quite that big market they were looking for. And if you're in the recording industry, there is only one game, selling as many albums as you can. This has led to some really unfortunate things, but for Metallica, they did it perfectly.
When I first met them, their first band was Ron McGovney on bass, Dave Mustaine, James Hetfield, and Lars Ulrich, of course, the fearsome foursome. And they were always having problems with their bass player, and they were always having problems with Dave, so who was always getting in fights, and he was just an intense, crazy guy, which was partially why they were so great live, I think. And I only saw them a few times, as most people did, before they changed. Back in 1981, Lars was working on a band, and we were joking about working on a magazine, a metal magazine, like Kerrang! Had just come out in August of 91. And I was joking with names. Lars had names like for his band called Red Vet or Blitz Spear or Blitzkrieg, or these funny names, very cheesy American hard rock hair band names. And I thought I had a better list, but I had Metal Mania, Metallica, which I had borrowed from a magazine, actually a book about heavy metal magazines we both read called Encyclopedia Metallica, which came out the year before in England. And so I was going to name my magazine Metallica. And he said, "That's a pretty good name, but don't you think Metal Mania is more to the point?" Don't you think Metal Mania is more to the point? So I said, yeah, that is a good name too. I don't know, we'll see. So a month later I had done the magazine and put Metal Mania on the title. And I was considering changing names every issue. I never got around to that, so I got up to 20 issues. And in the meantime, Metallica got up to 20 albums.
Maybe one of the first times I heard them and I actually paid attention was at a friend's house who we used to go over and get stoned with and drink beer and play poker with, and he used to play those bands, and that's where I used to hear him, and I loved it. I mean, well, I would say no. The first time I heard it, I thought it was awfully heavy for me. It was different music. I just started listening to that kind of stuff, but then after I listened to it a few times, it was just amazing. In the early 80s, I had been a punk rocker, and I started listening to other kinds of music. And so I started listening to a lot of metal, and around the early 80s, mid-80s, there was a lot of really cool bands in San Francisco. I mean, there was Testament, there was Exodus. Exodus, I think, was always Exodus and Death Angel were my two favorites. And Metallica, and there were all these bands. And Metallica started growing really big. They were bigger than the other bands, of course, but they were still really good, and there were shows all the time in town. It was just an amazing plethora of music.
Well, I think it's almost a classic example of just you constantly tour, and that's all. In some ways, Metallica was a San Francisco band only in that maybe their bills got mailed there, but they were just so constantly on the road. And it's a classic example of grassroots success that you keep playing out and you keep touring and you keep building that audience and you make good albums, and people eventually come to it. I mean, Master of Puppets was a huge album with zero airplay. MTV wasn't paying attention to them, and it was massive, and I think that was one of those surprising cases where you just have a groundswell of support that isn't manipulated by the record industry cramming a band down your throat.
They made it big without airplay. They made it big without any kind of commercialism at all. I mean, when MTV was playing Poison crap, there was, this great music that was underground, and it was just a real thriving scene. I think a lot of it maybe was the fact that they, at that time anyway, liked to share their music with people for free. I know, what a concept, right? They liked, tape trading was real big. They took the Grateful Dead thing of making tapes at shows and trading amongst each other, and it was considered really cool back then.
Metallica may have started out in Southern California, but they weren't exactly listening to fucking Kokomo by the Beach Boys. Lars had just moved from Denmark, where his father was a tennis player, and James was tired of the monotonous suburban life of bottle blondes and Porsches. The two shared their love of heavy metal, and soon began looking for band members. Metallica we know today is Kurt Hammond on guitar, Jason Newsted on bass, Lars Ulrich on drums, and of course James Hetfield on lead guitar with bitchin' vocals.
Who's your favorite Metallica member?
James Hetfield.
Why?
Because he's hot. I'd have to agree. I think he's hot.
James was a kind of a gruff, non-speaking, cool guy, but he didn't speak too much, so we just, we just listened to him when he did. He made you listen when he did finally speak, and he just liked to drink and party, as they all did at that time.
For James, music provided a release. His mother died when he was young, and the suburban California lifestyle wasn't for him.
James is a pretty intense guy. James is a real intense guy, like Clint Eastwood. James, he lets his actions speak for him. He doesn't always warn you of something. He'll be mad or he'll be happy, but he'll just do it. He lets his actions speak for himself. That's why on stage is where he lets it all out. Most of the time, he's very reserved. Around 1980, we were partying up on a hill, Strawberry Hill, in San Francisco, and our friend Rich Birch had run into this record collector foreigner guy in Berkeley at the record stores, and he had all these cool patches, Diamond Head, Angel Witch, Motorhead, all these amazing bands, and he just was totally into underground metal that we had just started getting into, and he talked funny, and so we brought him up to this party out in the middle of this island, in the middle of a lake, in the middle of the Golden Gate Park, where cops couldn't get up to, so we could drink and party, and he talked funny about all these amazing bands we'd only just heard about, and he played us some tapes, and we played him some tapes, and we just hung out and partied. Oh, we thought he was bullshitting us, but a lot of the time he told us bands like A to Z were actually called Zed, and he told us really funny stories, but we figured he was European, so we could understand why he was a little weird. But yeah, he was pretty entertaining and knew a lot about music and hung out with Motorhead and various other bands, and he knew a lot.
Well, I think Lars is one of the best drummers there is nowadays. I mean, I play drums, I watch him play drums, I look at his sheet music, and he's really one of the best drummers there is.
The laid-back California lifestyle was new to Lars, but he also shared a deep passion for heavy metal.
The best way it's been described is de facto spokesman. And he is that way. I mean, he's just very, you give him a camera and you ask him a question, he talks. And so when I'm interviewing him, that's really good, because it means you don't have to draw anything out of him. So many rock artists and so many artists, oh yeah, man, yeah. He's not. He's very articulate, straightforward, and very honest. In fact, because I remember giving him sort of a big build-up, a man whose name is synonymous with metal drumming, and he laughed in the back. He thought that was a little over the top. He was actually kind of modest about it. Oh, my God. But, he's very honest and straightforward, and yeah, he seems to speak for the band, and he does a good job of it. And I've seen him, sometimes when you read words on the page, they sound angrier than they actually are. When I hear him or I see him, he doesn't seem angry. He seems very to the point. And that's to his credit, because every band, in order to succeed in the business, needs, a PR-savvy person. If Mark McGuire didn't have a certain sort of telegenics, a sort of humble appeal, I mean, yeah, he would have gone down in the record books as breaking the old record of home runs per season, but he wouldn't have been, the big media sensation it was. Well, like I said, Lars is articulate. Part of this may have to do with the fact that he grew up in a European country, essentially, and came here. And because of that, he's maybe a little more disciplined in some ways. But he's also sort of funny and sort of let loose, too. But he's easier to deal with. I asked Lars specifically, so you have a new addition to the family now. What's that like? I mean, is he going to follow in your footsteps in the rock and roll business? And he goes, not if I can help it. So he's very clear about the games that have to be played, and he would kind of like maybe his child not have to deal with that. And it's, pretty responsible behavior there for a, heavy metal headbanger rock and roller drummer.
The boys never met a bar stool they didn't like, and that turned out to be a bit of a problem for guitarist Dave Mustaine.
Oh yeah, Dave Mustaine was pretty wild. He lived, ate, drank metal. He drank and he partied, and he was crazy and wild, and almost every concert he'd get drunk enough to fight somebody. And it kind of added to the energy of the concert.
But Dave took things a little too far, and the boys were forced to replace him on lead guitar with Kirk Hammett, a phenom from the Oakland area.
The Kirk I remember was very quiet, very youthful looking. Probably didn't shave much in high school, and had a very boyish face, very intense about his music, quiet, didn't get real involved in a lot of school activities.
Except guitar.
Except guitar. We had a music teacher here, Keith B., who just recently passed away, who was a professional musician himself, so he played in large orchestra sounds from the 40s like Glenn Miller, had his own band called the Glenn Willard Band, and played in San Francisco hotels all the time. And we had this professional musician who was teaching here. And so we had a tax initiative in the 70s called Prop 13, which cut a lot of money from the schools. And of course, instead of cutting anything from sports, they cut from fine arts and music. And he was very concerned that there wouldn't be enough instruments for kids, so he started a course called the Guitar Ensemble, because it was a high time for kids learning to play guitars. He figured if they're playing in their homes and their garages, they can play here at school. And so he built the whole program so that it was guitar ensemble all day long, so hundreds of kids took it. And the really serious musicians had the tutelage of a really professional musician who thought like a professional, who taught like one, and gave them big dreams and goals if they were really talented. And that's where I first remember Kirk, was going to Mr. B's guitar ensemble class, because they were so awesome. And just, he would point people out to me, he would say, "That young man," you know, and that was when he was in 10th grade, I remember too. And Kirk also played music with some kids who went on to be professionals. Les Claypool of Primus is from here, played in, I don't know that he was in the guitar ensemble, but he played in the jazz band. And David Godfrey, who played in a band called Heathen, also went to school here. And they all played music at the same time. This was the year Kirk was a junior, and that was his most active year. If you take any yearbooks out of our school library, we always keep old yearbooks, all the Kirk Hammett pictures are gone. They've all been carefully sliced out of the yearbooks, and kids talk about it. I mean, it's a legacy that's gone on. I think it gives kids who still go to school here a real sense of pride to know that somebody went to school in our little community, and now here they are performing, selling videos, angry at Napster and all of those things, you know, that life goes on, and I think that's an important legacy that you leave, that dreams can come true. You just have to work hard at them. Well, the first incident I can remember, which might be interesting, is he had an album out. I think it was the name of an album because it was at one of the big concerts he played at. It was Metal Up Your Ass, with the big toilet seat and the hand and the knife coming out. And the kids wanted to wear those shirts to school, and they were banned. So they couldn't wear their Kirk Hammett Metallica shirts to school, but they would wear them under other shirts, and you could kind of maybe tell, and they were kind of proud of that. But he was very, you know, it was a very popular sound, and we had a lot of kids who still had that guitar dream. I think that their drive was, well, here's a local kid who did it. And they didn't necessarily remember Kirk, but they saw that somebody who grew up right over here in Sherwood Forest, which is the name of the community in our town where he lived, had made it. And I think that makes the dream seem much more a reality.
The dude with the toughest job in the band is Jason. Not only does he have to keep the bass line, he will forever be in the shadow of a giant.
You know, of course they said, no way, we're not going to go on without Cliff. We're not going to do it, but Cliff would have wanted it. So luckily they did. A few months later, they started auditioning everybody. I'm talking about every guitarist, bass player in the whole Bay Area and beyond. And somehow they got this guy from Arizona who nobody had even heard about, from a band, Flotsam and Jetsam, nobody ever heard about. And he worked out. He worked out really well. I mean, they had Les Claypool. They had guys from almost every band in the California auditioning and beyond. So the fact that they clicked or gelled with Jason was pretty amazing, because they auditioned maybe 100 people at least.
September 27th, 1986. The band's on top of the world. Master of Puppets is flying off the shelves, and they're out doing what they do best, touring. It's just before dawn on a deserted highway between Copenhagen and Stockholm when the band's bus hits a patch of black ice and goes into a nasty skid. Everybody in the bus braces for impact. Cliff Burton was asleep in his top bunk at the time. And when the smoke cleared, he was gone, crushed to death, dead at age 24.
I remember coming into work and to teach, and one of the teachers came up to me and said, you know, that we heard this rumor that there had been an accident and that Cliff was killed. And I'm sure my reaction was the same as it was for a lot of people. It was just like, well, it's a rumor. Maybe it's not true. And unfortunately, a few days later, the confirmation came through. But it was pretty much a shock to lose somebody at that age. And, you know, in rock and roll, there's sort of a cliche of, well, it's the drugs and alcohol. This was just a stupid, tragic accident.
Steve Doherty had a huge influence on Cliff. Steve was the first to offer Cliff formal guitar training. It obviously paid off.
What I remember about him is he had an agenda. He came to me to learn how to read music, just sort of get the mechanics of it. So he always came prepared to his lesson, which when parents are paying for the lessons isn't always true. But I never had to ask him if he'd worked on his assignment. I always knew it. In fact, I would tease him about it sometimes. And schoolwork never seemed to get in the way. He was dedicated to working on his lessons.
Cliff could be quiet, but then he could be even wilder than James and crazier and even more intense than James. When he was into something, he was into it. And so he was into certain bands, and he was into certain looks, and he was into certain things, and everything else was shit to him. He didn't care. He was the truest headbanger I think I've ever met, because he was nonstop headbanging. He'd go to Exodus shows and headbang, and his band Trauma were more rock and roll, so he really stood out when his first band Trauma played. And so when James and Lars saw Trauma, this guy, this amazing bass player, just stood out way heads above everyone else. And so so it made sense for them to steal him.
Well, it was like the soul was gone. I mean, we knew that when Cliff died, that the band would change. I mean, they would never have done a video if he was alive. That would never have done. He was hated videos. He was dead set against it. They would have never put out the Black Album. They would have never done a Bob Seger cover. Never, you know? They would have never done any of that if Cliff Burton was alive. They may not be still been a band. They may have broken up, which sometimes, for some bands, I think is better. So he was really the soul. He was the conscience of the band. I mean, he was an incredible musician, but he was the conscience. He didn't stand for any of the MTV stuff. He hated that, and he didn't want them to, you know, turn into another MTV band.
Well, they seemed like really nice boys. I mean, they were fresh off the road. They had their if I remember, some huge truck here. They took all their stuff off the truck. They had 1 million road cases, and they were very friendly and ready to go to work. We were used to a little more madness at that time, because I think right around there was Poison with C.C. DeVille and that crew, and then we had the Motley crew, of course, with Tommy Lee and those guys, was pretty outrageous, and then Billy Idol, who was just so outrageous. And then Metallica shows up right in between, I think, Ted Nugent. I think Ted Nugent went to Alaska to shoot a bear. And I remember that because he sent the bear meat down to me to have a barbecue here, which is kind of interesting. And in that time, we did Metallica. I think it was a loud guitar band. And I think the thing that struck me the most was the lyrics that they chose to perform on that particular record. I mean, they seemed like just regular cool rock and roll guys. And one day I walked in there and they're singing the lyrics to this song, and I went, "Kids today, what are you going to do?" It's just, you know, the song we're talking about. And I was not shocked, because I've seen more than that, but to hear it on you know, over the loudspeakers, to go on a record was certainly eye-opening. They had books of girls that they were with that were very explicit and great. I mean, these young boys were like probably all young boys. The only thing they had opportunity to just share themselves with a much larger fan base. So they were really in the mood for this record. So they took these pictures and put it to words. So what you have here is an opera of their last tour.
This is Creeping Death, one of the several bands that make a living paying tribute to their heroes.
Had to be about July of '98. I got the idea to put the band together. Had a couple of musicians that weren't quite working it out. Placed an ad. James, of course, was the first one to respond, my lead guitar player. Showed up to the practice, just kicked major ass on the guitar. He was a virtual lock. A couple weeks later, I found a bass player and a drummer, and we had most of that together. For about a year, we kind of toiled around until we found a lead singer last November, or actually last October, Bill, and ever since then, we've been playing live gigs. I'm a manager of recruiting. My lead guitar player is a programmer. My lead singer deals with electronic components. The drummer was an accountant, and the bass player works in sales.
Creeping Death is fun. I mean, we just go up there and play Metallica covers. I myself am a computer programmer by day, so on the weekends I get up in front of a rowdy stage. People are beating the crap out of each other. Just get up there with my guitar and play some good music, and everybody has fun. We get up there, and people are just so into it. I mean, even if we're having a bad night, people are just, you know, jumping around, having a little mosh pit, and banging their head, having a good time. So you can't go wrong playing Metallica music.
We're just going to keep playing the metal, and we're just going to try and get as many fans as we can and spread the good word of Metallica around. And, you know, this band isn't about gravy training Metallica. This band is about getting the old thrash metal back.
Metallica, dude! What's going on, doggy? Come on. Thanks, bud.
Drunk assholes, no matter where you go. There's always an asshole.
Metallica, dude! Metallica, dude! Metallica, dude!
If you ask anybody in the band what is their big catch to Metallica, we all have the roots in the 80s thrash metal. We want to play it as much as possible. It's not being played on the radio, so the best way to do it, if you can't hear it on the radio, is go out and play it yourself. So we're going to play as much as possible, try and get as many fans as possible. We hope we sell a lot of albums for Metallica, and we hope everybody has a great time.
Puppets.
Master of Puppets, being that it was, you know, about the horrors of drug abuse, it really, you know, spoke to me, specifically chemicals. you know, like coke and all that stuff, and what it can do to you and how it destroys lives, and it's true. And you know, I'm just glad that they put that record out and got that message out. You know, don't do this stuff or you get fucked up.
I think that was definitely the turning point. I mean, for them to get a really solid national audience, that was, I mean, I remember going to high school and that being, you know, that was the big album. I think that records like, you know, Kill 'Em All and, you know, Ride the Lightning was certainly the one that helped catapult them, you know, to get onto a big label and start, you know, getting really huge. But I think Master of Puppets was where, you know, I think just critically, it was a really great record. And I think, you know, the fan base just really took to it as well. So those two things combined and you throw in the touring and, you know, it was just bound to be huge.
They're angry at the world, and I don't blame them. Look at Injustice for All. It's just anger at the death of Cliff and at the injustices of the world. You know, how good, honest people are getting screwed over by everything from corporate America to the U.S. government.
Metallica may be angry, but they love to push the envelope and take chances. Take S&M, for example.
Okay, now I'm positive that you're not going to find many people who are going to see a mostly Mozart concert at Hollywood Bowl are not going to be banging their heads at the Coliseum. But notice how that's at least introducing a different type of twist, a different genre, and like I said, they did it well. So this also, like I said, shows you exactly that Metallica has, I guess you could call it, some juice. The world, or a lot of the music community, looks to Metallica as to where heavy metal is or what it should be. And another comparison to the Beatles, not unlike the way the Beatles toward the later part of the 60s defined what pop music was. Metallica is actually sort of defining what heavy metal music is. You know, Metallica is at the point now in their career where everybody wishes to be. When you pick up that guitar for the first time in a garage, and I'm going to be a big star, Metallica is there now. Took them 18 years. Let's forget about this overnight success thing. It never happens. But they're there.
Where to see Metallica?
Corn. I've got a Metallica tattoo on my boob, but I can't show you on TV.
Yeah, her shirt would be way too difficult to take off. Way too hard.
You know, they don't really have any problems where they're going to be in rehab and stuff like that. You never hear nothing about that, you know, which is good. And I think, you know, I've gone to concerts and I've seen guys out there with their 10-year-old or 11-year-old kid going to concerts. I was at the Irvine Meadows show and there was a 65-year-old lady there just to see Metallica.
You know, I've been a Metallica fan since 84, 85. You know, I love the old stuff. I love the new stuff. I've seen them live like 4 or 5 times, stadium shows, arena shows. Every chance I get, I go to see their shows. They just put on a killer show. They rock the house every single time, man. The best rock and roll band, heavy metal band to grace the face of the planet ever. Metallica is the best.
Why?
You know what? They've just got this energy, man, and their songs and their lyrics and just their music and their whole persona, man, is just something that's so real and just is so true to life, man. And anybody that listens to them knows why Metallica is just the best ever.
We're not like wild. I don't think we've had enough beer.
You know what?
Look at everybody
Actually,
here.
I've never seen them in concert. This is my first time. I've always wanted to, and I've never seen it. It's my first. I can't wait. It's going to be so bad.
I think the majority of the people here are to see Metallica.
Yeah. I've seen Korn. I've seen all of Metallica. Ugh.
They
Can't
kick
wait.
your
They're gonna
Metallica!
have so much fun.
They got me going on the music I'm doing now. You know, they're my major influences that got me to, and we're doing some similar type thing. And Metallica is really the only band that's doing that. There's not too many other bands, you know, on that line.
Well, just because they got their hair cut short doesn't mean a thing, you know. Long hair is really nothing. I mean, it's maybe a status back in the early days of glam rock, but now it's, you know, you got to keep up with the days. I mean, everybody around here's got short hair now. You might see a handful of people with long hair, but that's just the changing times. You know?
I like the short hair. It's much better than the long thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he looks so much cuter.
They all look better with short hair. They do. I like the short thing a lot better.
Now, I'm not too much into big hair, as you can see. I'm a little short on that one right there, but yeah, no hair, it's bald. But you know what, when they came out with their new albums like Load and Reload, a lot of people like disgrace them. They're like, oh, that's not Metallica, blah 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 blah. But you can listen, if you really listen to the music and you like Metallica, they've earned it from where they stand at now, from how long they've been here. No other band's been around that long. They're going to stay that way, and they're going to be there for years.
Metallica's all about the live performance.
Yeah, Metallica, I mean, they
put on the best show.
They always perform the best live. They're always number one. I mean, nobody can beat them. They're the Led Zeppelin of this century. So.
There we go.
I'm sorry. This decade.
No, they've been playing since ages. Two decades now.
They're the best band to watch live. By far, in a way, they hold the show, they carry the show.
Metallica has always been very, very true to its roots. And the only times it seems like they strayed, there's sort of an explanation for that. Either like a death in the band, or maybe a producer who doesn't quite work with them well, and you still got to get that album out. So I think these fans, early on, tapped in to something that Metallica was saying. Like I said, some felt that they sold out. Well, those are sometimes people we sometimes like to call tragically hip. They're just too loyalist. Everything evolves. And I think most Metallica fans have easily accepted the directions they've gone. In fact, they are the leader of where metal is going right now. And this loyalty makes perfect sense. It's something they can believe in. And here's a good example. This is a silly example, but in media it works. Why do car chases, we had one today as a matter of fact, why do those get such big ratings? It's real. It's real. It's not contrived. That could really happen. Why are these new reality shows where it's real? All right? These fans tapped into Metallica early because they understood that what they were doing was real and it was authentic.
You ever downloaded a Metallica song from the internet? Don't lie to me, I know you have. You know, it's amazing how this little piece of plastic in a modem can cause such a stink. I'm not going to bore you with the details because you probably already know them. But I will tell you that Metallica's no-holds-barred, gloves-off death match with Napster is causing a huge debate among Metallica fans. The avid listener, the casual listener, and even the poser. Everyone has an opinion.
I think people should have to pay for the music. I mean, they're writing music, they're playing music, and they're busting their butts off, and they have a job, same as everybody else, and I think that people should be paying to buy their CDs that they put
That's
out.
their work.
And I pretty much agree with them.
They respect very much what Metallica says about those kinds of rights, but music has gotten so expensive that they still go to Napster. Now, there's a few, we have debates about that frequently. Kids will say, you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, I'm not doing that anymore, you know, and so they're really, I think, loyal to the band.
I just think that all this crap about Napster is just, I don't know if he's just doing it for the publicity or if he really actually feels this way about it. I don't know, and I don't like it.
But the reality is that things cost so much these days that some kids are always going to burn CDs. And they say that. You know, I feel real bad and I feel really guilty every time I do it, but, you know, I don't have 20 bucks, and most of my students would have to work 4 hours to afford one CD.
I don't think they're losing money.
No, well, they claim to say they're not doing it, that it's not illegal.
Test one song, go buy the album, what's the big deal?
I don't know, I haven't done it myself, I haven't downloaded any music, but I don't see anything wrong with it.
I think Lars needs a
I kind
cause,
of think that
and he's
they're doing
found
the
it.
work and they're just kind of giving it away to people.
I know Lars is against it, isn't he?
Napster hijacked our music without asking. They never sought our permission. Our catalog of music simply became available for free downloads on the Napster system.
I think there's a lot of people who kind of see the irony that Metallica started out as a band who was, got their name out by distributing tapes, and, that they built this underground groundswell of people, and in some ways that, Napster and MP3 distribution is the same sort of thing for a lot of bands, where people can, find out about new groups and turn people on to other things, and now for Metallica to say that, we have no patience and no interest in this sort of what they call piracy is a little bit disingenuous. It certainly is, it's almost a 180-degree turnaround from, the very thinking that got them started in the first place.
I do not have a problem with any artist voluntarily distributing his or her songs through any means that artist so chooses. But just like a carpenter who crafts a table gets to decide whether he wants to keep it, sell it, or give it away? Shouldn't we have the same options? We should decide what happens to our music, not a company with no rights in our recordings, which has never invested a penny in our music or had anything to do with its creation.
I think they're right, man. They should, it should be able to hold on to their music. Someone else shouldn't be able to profit by it. You know, if anybody's profiting by it, it should be them. Yeah, dude, I'm all with Lars. He knows what he's talking about. I'd be protecting my shit, too.
But, you know, Lars and those guys used to sit around in their garage and would plug it in, you know, one of their favorite bands and dub up the tape.
But the thing is, if people are making money off it, big money, it should be them, not somebody else. That's the bottom line.
Metallica got famous years ago by bootlegging tapes.
Right, but that's different. That's not big money like the internet. The internet's big money. Garage to garage. You know, that Metallica got started like that from, you know, kid to kid and stuff, not corporation. I mean, this Napsters, they're making money. You know?
But actually, Napster's not making any money right now.
Well, whoever, I don't know. All I'm saying, if anybody's making money, it should be Metallica.
It's hard to tell with Lars speaking so much about Napster, about whether he is really being sincere about, well, let's support, you know, the artists, right? Because I don't think that Metallica is really hurting terribly in that situation.
The day of going to a music store and paying $17 for a piece of plastic, okay, that has 3 songs you like and 12 you don't, and paying $17, $18, but that day is going to be history soon. You should be able to go on the internet, download the songs you like for like $2 a pop, right onto your hard drive, and then burn them into your CD. Okay, the rights get paid to the artist, the record company makes a business, fine. But if you go to these record company sites and you say, okay, let's pick out the new, you know, whatever CD from the latest artist that you like, you don't get that option. You get an option to pay, you know, pretty much retail price for it, and for the glorious sum of $5, maybe it'll get there in 2 days. That is nonsense, all right? Napster just should have worked a little more aggressively, and I bet you Metallica would have been a band that would have gone along with this, to just say, here, let us market that, and if someone swaps a song, you'll get, you know, so much in royalties for that. I bet you Metallica might have gone for that.
Well, you know, it's kind of crazy, you know. I kind of am on Metallica's side for it because, you know, it's kind of crazy because, you know, they're, you know, even though they're in it for the fans, you know, they got to make a living too, man. So, you know, they got to make some money, you know. So I understand where they're coming from. So, yeah, Metallica, you got to do what you got to do, man. But stay true to the fans, and we'll stand behind you 100%. You know, Metallica all the way. I love them.
With the release of Mission Impossible 2 soundtrack, and he did I Disappear, as I understand it, that song, and as a musician, I've kind of done things like this too, that song from conception, I mean, from the time that supposedly Tom Cruise called up and said, could you contribute a song to the soundtrack? From the time they knew they should do a song and the time it was in the can, finished, ready to go, it was 1 week, all right? Now, fortunately, at this time, of course, Metallica is generally not on tour, so they're sort of taking a hiatus so they could do that. But if you notice, there's a raw excitement in that because they, boom, okay, there wasn't a pressure about making it out. It was just, hey, all right, here's a riff, let's work on it, let's do it into a thing, and let's just throw it out there. Well, Lars liked the results, America seems to like the results, and they're playing that song live now on their Summer Sanitarium tour, and they said, that's it. The next album we're going to record just using that different technique. If the technique works, that'll make it sound a little bit more toward their earlier days, which ought to make the real, true, traditionalist Metallica fans happy, but still be good enough that the rest of the world will be entertained by it too. So I find that fascinating, and I think it's good that they're going to take that approach and it'll work. What rock is in the year 2000? If you had to say, give me an example of rock and roll, I would pull out a Metallica album. Probably right now I Disappear. Just let him hear it, because that's a pretty good, solid representation of what Metallica does. Now, you can't misunderstand when I say, are they the ultimate, the everything and all? No, the glory of music is that there's lots of things. It's just some people really hit the pinnacle in certain areas. Metallica has hit the pinnacle in rock. In the year 2000, I'd have to say the most successful rock would have to be Metallica in terms of leading the business there, defining what rock is. And so they should be really proud of that, because you probably hit that stage once in your entire career. And this will evolve. And notice that Metallica is still involved with that evolution, with the Kid Rock thing and the Korn and the new stuff and taking chances. And that's how you make it into the history books. You're there at the beginning, you get there at the top, you show the way, and you sort of hand it off to the next generation, and so it goes generation after generation after generation. Metallica is what rock is in the year 2000.
The Metallica we know today consists of... The Metallica we know today consists of Kirk Hammett on guitar, James Newsted on bass, Lars Ulrich on drums, and the Metallica we know today is Kirk Hammett on guitar, James Newsted, or Jason Newsted as his friends know him, on bass. I'm not gonna go with that. They came out of nowhere in the early 80s. There's no radio play at all. How did they do it, you ask? They toured. They toured, and they toured. That scared me. You turned on your TV, you bought yourself a CD, you may have gone to see one of their legendary concerts, or heaven forbid, you downloaded an MP3. I spilled it. Camera lens. Sorry about that. I know that's an absolute no-no.